Hi guys.
Hello.
Welcome to Etta Arlene's Spirit Cast. If you're new to this podcast, we talk about all things related to mindfulness, magic, metaphysics, astrology, tarot, Reiki, and anything in that realm. Today we have two guests. We have Olivia. She's also known as the Witch of Wonderlust, and we have Mystic Dylan. If we sound a little bit different, it's because we are still practicing our social distancing. And it's been interesting. I've been ordering a bunch of books.
As per usual, I don't think that's really out of character.
Yeah, I have the Practical Herbal Medicine Handbook. It's really juicy. I'm excited to actually I've always made home remedies, and it's kind of funny because today we're talking about folk magic, and I guess that would be considered a part of it, like those remedies you make. What's the one I do for headaches? Turmeric.
What do we call it for the headaches? I thought you were talking about your flu one, the tonic.
Oh,
flu
yeah, I have the flu tonic too. The tonic works.
Yeah, that one actually works. I'm not saying your migraine one doesn't work, but
the migraine one's 50-50 because you can't predict migraines. But that pain relief, the anti-inflammatory in it definitely helps with other body pains. It helped with my arthritis. But
See,
this
I
book,
the golden milk. You put me on to that.
When I would make it, I would do chai tea, and then the turmeric, and almond milk. But I think what for golden milk you leave the tea out of it, right? It's like honey.
It's turmeric. I use turmeric, agave, cardamom, black pepper. It's really spicy. So basically you're just making a deconstructed chai tea on steroids.
Yeah. But the healing aspect, I think the main healing is the turmeric, and then chai tea has caffeine in it, and caffeine helps with headaches.
Oh yeah,
that's why I would use the chai tea. And then when I got desperate, I was just throwing turmeric in my coffee. But this book is the official way to make that stuff. And yeah, and the thing that I thought, I just started reading it, and the thing that's interesting about it is it talks about how our the pharmaceutical industry, I guess they do study natural herbs and stuff like that, and a lot of medicines are derived from these natural herbs. And one of them I thought was peculiar was aspirin. I guess is found in this one herb, or it's made from I wish I could remember what it was called. I'd have to get back at you guys with that. But a lot of medicines, one of the main ingredients are these herbal remedies, and some people will just start taking that herb instead of buying. We'll use aspirin as an example, because of the additional ingredients that might cause other issues. And you have a aspirin allergy, so I was I'm very curious if you would still have the same reaction to the herb.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because I have the inflammatory reaction to aspirin and ibuprofen. So I'm curious if I do the herb, it will fix that issue instead of taking the as an alternative to actually taking any type of medicine, because I can't take it.
Yeah, well, I mean, yeah. And the other book I got is really good. It's the Scott Cunningham complete book of incense, oils, and brews, and that's full witch, and it's really man, it's good. It talks a lot about the power, the energy that's in plants and oils and stuff like that, and then how you're using your energy to work with it for whatever your purpose is. It's your personal energy, which I think is a big part of any kind of practice. I mean, would you agree?
Well, I think that it is your personal energy. That's my opinion. I mean, everybody practices their style of mysticism the way they want to, I guess. It's whatever you give your belief to is what you give power to. But I choose to believe that your power comes from within and that it's all you. So you're infusing your energy, your power into everything that you do. And that's you. It's not, you don't have to do all the extra juju and necessarily have the altar unless you want to. Like, it's totally cool. Like, that's just how I roll. But it's just what you want to do. So
yes, what he says is that the things like having an altar, saying like a quote like spell is just to like enhance that energy, though it doesn't.
It focuses it. I feel like it hones it in further and focuses that intention.
Yeah, that's what he says, pretty much.
Oh,
yeah.
Nice.
He helps you focus. It's to help focus. Like some people, he said some people are really bad at like visualizing, and whenever you are using these certain, things and words and stuff like that, it helps with your intention. And then, but then you have like the herbs and things like that have their own energy that correspond. But he was saying that what you use is basically up to like what resonates with you as well. So like if, I don't know, you're trying to like do a money thing, if for whatever reason green doesn't resonate with you, you would use the color that felt like money or opulence to you, which might be, say, gold. So there's a lot of like creating your own practice and tailoring like traditions with what works for you. And there's a lot of different types of traditions and stuff, and like a lot of people do things based off of their upbringing or the traditional way of practicing it, and stuff like that.
Yeah, you do things the way you're taught, and there's no wrong way to practice. If your intentions are good.
Yeah, well, that's what is interesting about this book. He does talk about how he says that you if you're like getting into magic, you want to have the right intentions. And one of the interesting things that he said when you do, and I don't know, everybody has different belief systems, but he's saying that when you do something to harm somebody, it doesn't matter how much like protection you think you have. At the end of the day, that negativity is coming from within you, and you can end up cursing yourself.
Exactly. And I always think back to when we talked to Thomas Mooneygle about what he said about like certain things, like those love spells and like so on and so forth. Like, people will approach him to do these certain like spells, and there's a karmic debt for that. Like, you can't do that stuff. Like, some people, you believe what you want to believe, but I believe in the universal laws. You believe in the universal laws. And there's a karmic debt to things, and you can't force will on people without having some sort of consequence. And echo.
Because the book's very heavy on like brews and herbs and like ritual baths, stuff like that. And he was saying that you might have.
That sounds fun. You're gonna have to like show me this in person.
I think you should like order it. I'll show you it in person, but I think you're gonna want to order it.
Yeah, just order it. Order it.
Just order it. Okay. I think we need to order it for Dan too.
Dan, everybody, you get a book. You get a book.
Wine? I want my wine.
Where's your wine?
Yeah, there's like a Whew, my wine delivery's here.
Oh, I'm good on wine. This quarantine has been working wonders for me. I am thriving right now. Literally thriving. I can't stress it enough.
Like just doing stuff.
I'm home. Yeah, my sleep schedule is totally fucked up. Like, really bad. Really, really bad. I've only been getting like 4 or 5 hours of sleep a night. But I'm happy I'm home. This is proof that the world still turns without having everybody out of their fucking houses.
Yeah.
the importance of like self-reflection and focusing on what you need to do.
Yeah.
But it's just funny because like we actually found Olivia because of my soul searching and self-reflection stuff. Because we actually, when we interviewed Avi, we talked to him. Every time we interview people, they read me.
Yeah.
You know, we deal with a lot of mystical people out here, and sometimes people can see the truths that you don't want to admit or face yourself, or they can see that you have like a journey ahead of you and are trying to like help you on that way, or they feel called to. And Avi had a moment like that with me, and he encouraged me to work with certain goddesses to help me work through some issues that I was going through at the time. And in efforts of doing that research, I came across a video that Olivia made about one of the goddesses, and then we went down the rabbit hole with her channel, and I was like, yay, like this is awesome. And we reached out to her, and that's how I got her. So we hit the jackpot. This was actually a really fun conversation, and it was really nice connecting with Mystic Dylan as well. He's a wealth of knowledge. So
you can learn a lot from both of them, you know, like
both of them, yeah. They both have YouTube channels.
Yes, and we'll have all that linked down below. And also, you know, their websites. I love all the resources on Olivia's website. I think I said during the interview, but she has a lot of like helpful tools for people who are just getting into magic or, you know, kind of like mysticism or what have you. So yeah,
and
definitely.
Mystic Dylan's been in the game for a long time.
Oh my gosh, I know. I actually funny, I was on YouTube and there was like a documentary or some sort of like thing someone did about magic, and they like sought him out to get information. And I wish I could remember what it was, but they like mentioned him and I was like, "Oh shoot." Like, man, we're really lucky.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I guess we can let them listen to the interview now.
Yeah. Yeah. Let's get
over
that. Let them get some knowledge.
Yeah. All right.
Hey guys, we just want to take a second to let you know where you can find us at. You can listen to our podcast on all major podcasting networks like Stitcher, iTunes, and more. You can also follow us on Instagram at Etta Arlene, on Twitter at edpro_pgh, on Pinterest at Etta Arlene, on Tumblr at Etta Arlene, and you can go to our website to subscribe for some Reiki. Thanks for listening.
Today we have two awesome guests, and we're going to let them introduce themselves.
Hi, I'm Olivia. I am known as the Witch of Wonderlust on YouTube and on Instagram.
I'm Mystic Dylan, and I'm known as Mystic Dylan on YouTube and Instagram.
You guys are both very, very knowledgeable on anything in this, like, you know, magic realm. Like, we saw Dylan, you do like hoodoo and root work, like shamanism. That's really awesome. You guys do a lot of tarot, it looks like, or you do readings.
Yeah. I think actually probably my first dip into the metaphysical world was through readings. So first it started with palmistry, and then it kind of went into tarot. And then it was through the discovery of tarot that I was like, oh, this is linked to something, you know, greater. And then I started getting into magic and the history of magic.
Cool. And then Olivia, I love about your website, I love how you have a lot of resources for people who are beginning their magical journey as well. So I'm curious how, you touched on a little bit, Dylan, but how did both of you get started in, you know, this course of study, I would say?
Yeah.
Mine was a little more of a snowball. It just, I mean, you know, curious kid, and the occult is definitely that big dive of like, oh, there's just so much to learn about, so much unknown things. And one thing really just kind of led to another, and then all of a sudden I was like, well, I guess it's witchcraft now. So that's just it wasn't really like a one day that I was like, oh, this is what it is. It was just kind of one foot in front of the other.
Mine was kind of similar. Like I really do think that it was very much like I would say it was my environment, in the sense that, you know, my mom really liked, you know, aromatherapy, and she liked holistic stuff, and then we were kind of in a bookstore, and then we had this local bookshop, the Bodhi Tree, that I used to live right next to, and I used to go in there all the time, and one book would turn into another book, and then I discovered witchcraft, and it just went from there.
Yeah, it's usually, you know, it just starts happening, it seems.
Yeah, and it's so funny too, because I think, at least for me, I know that a lot of people were like, based on what I tap into and what I do and the spell work that I do and the readings that I offer, people always have this like idea that, like, I don't know, that I like walked in and something lit up and I had this weird supernatural experience, and I was teleported somewhere and given this knowledge, and then I started, and I wish I had that. It was not that exciting. At the end of the day, I'm a major book nerd.
Well, you have to be.
You gotta learn. There's a lot to learn. But that is funny that you said that, because I swear sometimes people think that we're like levitating over here, and I'm just like a great ball of.
Wait, you're not?
You're not? You're normal?
Olivia, you told me what?
I'm sorry, I'm a liar.
Oh dear, that's
okay.
funny.
So, do you guys have any like favorite magical practice that you do on a regular basis, or is there a certain thing that you would, I don't know, just brings you a lot of joy to do?
For me specifically, like at the end of in a perfect world, I do love the ritualistic practices of magic and the history that comes with that. So I love the idea, and I'm going to preface with the idea. I love the idea of ritual. The ancient Greeks, Romans, and Egyptians, they have this. They essentially made the structure of what we know as magic today, and ceremonial magic. So I do love that idea in ritual. When it comes to my practice, in terms of what I have access to and what I typically do, it's folk magic. It's all about the home and what's available to me. And I think that's something that I learned when I was in New Orleans. So like hoodoo and, voodoo or the aspects of, I just like the word folk magic because folk is familial, or the home. So it's pretty much like I do a lot of candle work. I incorporate that into my daily life. And then I work with gree bags, charms, and spells, anything that's tangible. I like hands-on magic.
Okay. I was just about to ask you guys about folk magic. So how is folk magic different from, say, other magical practices?
I was like, folk is familiar. Well, so the way that I see it, or the way that I was learned, folk essentially means family. Okay, so the folk magic is not geared towards one sect or one dogmatic practice. It's pretty much what you've learned through family, what you've learned from ancestral traditions, things that you picked up. A lot of it is culture based too. So the folk magic that Olivia practices is going to differ greatly from the folk magic that I practice or that anyone else practices. But what's interesting, and what you'll notice across the board, is that no matter how different the practices or how different the cultures, I promise you they all seem to connect in some way.
Yeah, well, because I practice both Irish and Filipino folk magic, because those are my half and half sides. And it's funny because, like, voodoo and hoodoo have a lot of Catholicism in it, but Irish folk magic has a lot of Catholicism in it, and you'll just see like all of these connections. And Filipino folk magic looks a lot like Santeria because of the Spanish took over the Philippines, so that was obviously integrated into their culture. And again, Catholicism is a huge thing, so it looks a lot like New Orleans hoodoo. But if you look at all of these different folk magics, like Dylan said, it's all really just connected. There's not really a defined line between each and every one of them.
Okay, I see. So, like what you grow up with would be considered like folk magic. It sounds like
It's almost like, not to interrupt you, but it's almost like, I'm sure you've grown up with certain traditions or old wives' tales or the tooth fairy blowing a candle out for your birthday. It's weird to think of it like that, but all that is folk magic.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And it's so funny too, because I can't tell, whenever I tell people this, they're like, what? And I'm like, yes, you're doing witchcraft.
Sorry to break it to you.
Sorry. And I'm actually going to take it a step further. I recently, and only because I just got in this debate the other day, and unfortunately I don't know if it's because I'm a Taurus. I'm not that knowledgeable with astrology, but like I'm very stubborn. So like I'm very passive, but once I get into debates, I get into debates. So someone was like, I'm just prefacing in case like I never want to come off as argumentative. I just get very like,
he just gets excited.
I get passionate. Yeah. So someone told me, they were like, well, hoodoo and voodoo, because it's Catholicism, that's not paganism. That's not magic. And I was like, I hear you. Believe me, but I'm going to disagree because the Catholicism that voodoo incorporates and that the Irish incorporate, remember, Catholicism was made, or Christianity was made popular by the Romans, and it was the Romans who really structured, Roman Catholicism structured that idea, and they incorporated a lot of pagan practices into Catholicism. So whether or not you say, oh, well, hoodoo and voodoo are not pagan, they may not be pagan at heart. Well, actually, that's a lie. They may not be pagan at the forefront. They are pagan at heart. If that makes sense.
Yeah.
Because even the way that we look at the Eucharist, okay? The idea of consuming the body of Jesus and the blood of Jesus, okay? That comes from pagan traditions, okay? I can't tell you how many pagan rituals that you look at. I mean, if you look at the Bacchae, which are the followers of Dionysus, they believed that the bread represented Dionysus's flesh and the wine represented his blood. So, I mean, and going forward to that Dionysus theory, if we look at Mardi Gras was a way of celebrating Dionysus that we now integrate into Fat Tuesday. And where is that celebrated? New Orleans.
You're so passionate.
And I'm getting off my soapbox now.
I love it.
I love it. You guys are so knowledgeable. I love this.
Because like it's just, people just are magical in general. Like like you were saying, like old wives' tales, just these traditions, and it's like we're putting them in boxes, and then using that to justify being like mean to people or condoning, or condemning people and the like for having a magical practice when it's like you're doing it yourself too.
Yeah. So can you explain voodoo and hoodoo for our listeners?
Oh, this is going to be another Dylan one for sure.
Oh, I promise I'm going to let Olivia speak. I promise.
you're like my OG teacher, so it's fine.
So, and this is another one. I always have to preface with, everyone's going to have a different opinion. I always go from what I was taught, and from what I've read, and from an anthropological standpoint. But for modern senses, what I was taught, it's good to know that there are different aspects of voodoo. So there is the Haitian voodoo, which is a closed religion that you have to be initiated to. And then there is a Voodoo of New Orleans. Typically that's the one that is spelled VOOD, VOODOO. So the Voodoo of New Orleans, so the way that I learned is that voodoo is the more spiritual side. So they're the ones that focus more on the religious aspects, the Loa, which are the spirits of voodoo. And then hoodoo is strictly the magical practice.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, does that make sense? So like voodoo would be the religious aspect, hoodoo would be the magical aspect.
Oh wow, I bet people confuse that all the time.
All the time. Now, there's also a book by Denise Alvarado that I recommend. It's called the Voodoo Hoodoo Spell Book, and she really goes into that and that aspect. And the hardest thing about, I will say, of all the spiritual practices and magical practices, voodoo hoodoo is probably the one that gets the most. There's so much stigma attached to it. There's so much controversy. So like I get attacked all the time because like I tend to not even use the hashtag hoodoo anymore, because people will be like, oh, well, you need to be black or have African ancestry and stuff like that. And I will tell you, for listeners and people coming through, from what I know, well, one, I feel I don't need to wear my D23 on my chest, but I'm part Native American Cherokee. I'm Irish. My dad is Cuban. So I have from Cuba. So I do have that ancestry. And hoodoo came via the Atlantic slave trade, okay? It is African folk magic, but it is African folk magic that has been synchronized with Catholicism, Irish, Spanish, Native American. So it's a combination of all those things, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I mean, I just associated hoodoo. I mean, it's definitely, in my opinion, I would say, like New Orleans. Like I associate it with the South too, so I can see how, like, let's say, predominantly African, because of like slavery, they're doing hoodoo, but as time goes, as everywhere gets more diverse and slavery has ended, I can see the practices like spreading throughout that region, to like where it's at now, where it's like everybody's doing it.
Yeah, and it's also, I mean, you also have to think about when you look at that time period. So when you look from the 17th, 18th, 19th century, you're right in terms of the region. You have that South, it was the majority of the Caribbean. You have Caribbean Obey, which is now incorporated into it. I mean, it's not a lot of people think that it's a new practice, and it's not. It's quite old. And the other thing too is that hoodoo is very diverse. There's no one rule in hoodoo, very similar to folk magic. Everyone's going to have their own idea about it.
Yeah. I mean, I think it feels like in recent times you hear it, it's definitely gotten more popular, it seems like, on the internet. Like you hear about it more, but maybe like people don't have the background. They're just kind of like, oh, hoodoo, and I don't know, doing their own, doing spells and the like, but not understanding it fully, perhaps.
Yeah, well, and I think especially New Orleans hoodoo, like you think about the one person that everybody thinks about is Marie Laveau, right? And she was half Haitian, half Irish, and her whole reasoning for, I mean, like making New Orleans hoodoo was so that she could create a practice that everybody could practice. And that's why I think there's such a big difference on Haitian hoodoo and voodoo and New Orleans hoodoo and voodoo, because it's like one is a closed practice, closed religion. The other one was meant and created for everybody. And like Dylan said, it used to be one of the largest world ports. So you had people from all over the world coming around and sharing their cultures and sharing their religious beliefs. And Marie Laveau took from all of those things and had public rituals for the people that were being oppressed, and so it's kind of like that's a big part of hoodoo, is, like he said, using what you have and not really worrying about having certain tools or having a coven or whatever. It's like just whatever you have, you get crafty knowing that you have the power to use what you have to get what you need.
You guys are like a wealth of knowledge.
Yeah.
That's right. And going off of what Olivia said, I call her the Harriet Tubman of voodoo, because Marie Laveau. No, not Olivia. I just want to preface that. Gosh, Instagram, I can get all these comments. It's gonna be like, what, Dylan? No. Marie Laveau is definitely, I call her the Harriet Tubman of voodoo, because here's the thing too. by her being mixed and biracial, she used that to her advantage.
Yeah.
You know, she blended them together.
She gave them power.
She gave them power. She gave them power. She took the Native American practices, so people that were already oppressed, the Irish, she took the African, and she blended this into a spiritual practice that was diverse, that everyone could get their hands on.
And she was a devout Catholic, so when people try to tell me that Catholicism is not witchy, I laugh.
Yes, and they have her records. She attended Catholic Mass every Sunday. And that's why they say Catholic in the front, voodoo in the back.
I've never heard that before.
Oh man, I didn't like Marie Laveau. Like I know her, you know,
everybody knows Lou. Yeah,
like just not. I didn't understand fully the role she played. I guess. Wow, that's really amazing.
She essentially formed what we know of voodoo today. You know, she kind of, I wouldn't say she structured it, but she definitely was the pavement for it. The when you think of voodoo rituals, when you think of snakes, when you think of bones and all that, and I hate to say this word, but that aesthetic is primarily due to her. So every Sunday she would go to Catholic Mass, and then remember Sunday was the day off, so she would go to Congo Square. It was kind of the only place where the slaves were allowed to kind of have their break, and she would perform these voodoo rituals in Congo Square. No one could do anything. But what ended up happening is that as it progressed, you had people from different mixes, different races participating in these dances and these rituals. She was known to dance with a python, which was very exotic. So people were like, oh my gosh, because the snake represents Dambala, which is essentially one of the main Loa and renewal and birth. And then on St. John's Eve, she would do quote unquote voodoo baptisms or head washings, and she would just she would purge you of all your sins and everything. So it was she was a huge influence. And the thing too that I love about her, she was very theatrical. And I think that she knew, I know I'm such a theater kid, but she knew how to own it.
Oh wow. Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
I feel like we should talk more about folk magic. So I guess now I would ask, so we know what hoodoo and voodoo are. So how is folk magic different from those two again?
Well, I mean, it's not really different because folk magic is kind of the umbrella term for those two. So those would fall under folk magic, whereas, you know, folk magic is hoodoo and voodoo, but it is also other things. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Okay, that makes a lot.
And I would say, I guess hoodoo and voodoo, their primary link is the African synchronization or the African folk magic aspect.
Oh, have you two seen the movie Midsummer?
No, not yet.
It's a good one. But there is actually a lot of Swedish and European folk magic in that movie. So, I mean, it's peppered through, but there's actual spells and folk magic that they used to use and that have been recorded that they actually tie into that movie. So it's a little less like hoodoo looking because, you know, it's not hoodoo, but it is like the earth-based folk magic type of stuff.
Okay.
So, Olivia, earlier you said that you practiced Irish and Filipino folk magic. How did the two differ in certain aspects?
I can't really I can tell you like how they feel different. So, you know, I think the Filipino folk magic is something that I'm still like looking more into because that side of my family is just a big question mark to me still at the time. But I have learned enough about it that I think it's really funny that both of them connect really well in like Catholicism. So I see the Catholic saints or like, you know, Psalms like show up all the time in both of those, which is really interesting. But the Irish folk magic is a lot more, I'm realizing that it's much more fae based. Like there's a lot of fae. It's a like much more light feeling, like spiritual realm feeling, whereas the Filipino side is very earth, like it's very heavy. I don't know how to like like not heavy as in like bad, but just like heavy feeling, as in like, you know, carrying around a rock as opposed to carrying around smoke. It's just, I don't know how else to explain it, but when I'm practicing one or the other, that's just how it feels.
Okay. Oh, okay. Wow, that's interesting.
Yeah.
That's really interesting. I was going to ask you about if fairies were involved with the Irish.
Oh, very much so.
Mm-hmm.
Very much so. I have yet to learn more in depth about that, but I'm saving that because I have an upcoming trip to Ireland, so I'm going to be doing a lot of like dabbling and figuring out, you know, kind of seeing where that goes of just that curiosity with the curiosity of the Fae. But what I'm told is that a lot of people still believe in the Fae, like how Americans believe in spirits and ghosts. You know, the Irish believe in the Fae, which essentially are the same thing, but in a different route. Like we believe in the spirits of the dead chilling with us, whereas like the Fae is kind of those beings that are in between the spiritual realm and the earthly realm. There is so much information on the Fae that there is no way that I will be able to go through even with like bullet points, but very interesting entities.
Okay. We had interviewed a lady who had a fairy attachment, and she wasn't familiar with working with like fairies, and I forget what they did, her and her friend, but basically it must have been something like what you're talking about, like some sort of like folk magic, I would assume, based off what you guys are saying. But anyways, they call in this fairy to do what she wanted, and then she didn't realize she had to keep like giving the fairy like gifts.
They're needy.
They're needy. So when I didn't go to Ireland, but I went to London, and my father was working on a film. I went to London to assist with him, and the makeup artists, 2 of them were Irish, and they would put these bowls of milk and honey out for the Fae. And I guess the story, well, not the story, but when I was there, so it's 2 Irish makeup artists. One is a director, one's her assistant, and then the third girl is British, and like, you know, not like whatever. So she was Australian, because the British, they would know. She was Australian. She washed out, she was like, what the hell? She washed out the bowls and used them as a makeup dish.
Oh my God.
And the 2 Irish girls went psycho.
Oh,
I mean,
like you don't they were like, what? And like I just remember like they were like freaking out. They were in a trailer, so they had to like close all the curtains and they had to do everything, and then they were like, we need to find, so they were like making little twig things, and it was just so crazy how they took this. And one of the girls turned around 3 times and spit over her left shoulder. And she only had paper pounds, so she had to like trade and break it for coins, and they needed even coin. I mean, it was a thing.
Oh my gosh!
They went into full panic to try to fix the situation.
Do not rinse out the fairy bowls.
Oh my gosh! Yeah, it ended up becoming like a really negative attachment, and she had no idea what was going on. And then somebody's like, "Oh my goodness, you have like a fairy attachment. What have you been doing?" Like, but yeah, it worked out. So since we're talking about fairies, can you tell us a little bit about fairy circles?
So fairy circles, to my understanding, you can look at them either way, either from a logical or mystical or both standpoint. But they are basically quote unquote unnatural formations of natural items such as flowers or usually mushrooms that are formed in a circle, and you know, sometimes trees or something like that. But like if you see a natural thing creating a circle, then that is said to be a fairy circle. And the idea is that you never step into a fairy circle because that can transport you to the fairy realm, and you can or will get lost or stuck in that realm. And it's said never to dance in the fairy realm as well, or in the fairy circle, because
so if all of a sudden Olivia's Instagram goes
dark.
mute And you never see a post from her again.
You know I pole danced in the middle of a circle.
She pole danced in the middle of a fairy circle.
Oh dear. My friend just sent me pictures of one, and I was like, oh, I have to ask him since we're talking about it. Oh,
it's also like Olivia said, it's that, and it's the liminal, like I think it's that place in between worlds. Also stone circles, even though those are man-made, those are also supposed to be like a vortex or a place to kind of summon the fae. But it's different in the sense that you have someone creating it to conjure the fae, and then you have like an absolute natural circle.
Okay. And so if you're like conjuring the fae, like, does the size of the circle matter, or what could one do, like a small one? How does that work?
It can be any size. I mean, if you look at, like, if you go to Europe, like London, Ireland, things like that, they have all these stone circles, and those aren't necessarily primarily made for the fae, but it definitely is a sacred space that's supposed to be that liminal, and when I mean liminal, that in between worlds.
Okay.
Yeah, but I would say, like, in terms of like an actual fairy circle, that's more along the lines of what Olivia mentioned in terms of the natural, like, here is a circle and it is not man-made, and it's like, what?
It's okay. That's interesting, like, about circles being liminal spaces, because I'm thinking of like different meditation groups I've gone to, we've done like a circle formation, and now it's like hitting me like, oh, maybe that's why. Oh my goodness.
I think the circle's just like magical in general. You see it in every there's not one practice or culture or religion that I'm seeing that does not use shapes, but especially the circle.
Yeah. Circle or like spiral, because that's still the same thing. Like circle, spiral, labyrinth. Yep. I mean, it's all there.
It's everywhere.
I never thought of that. Yeah. I just never, like, oh wow. Okay, so Dylan, your practice would fall under the folk magic category as well, right?
Yes.
Okay. I'm getting it, guys. I'm understanding.
Yeah. Think of it this way, like, okay, so just to kind of distinguish, like, for me, the folk magic is folk magic for me is when I'm tapping into like my Native American, my Irish. When I tap into my roots, that's when I'm doing like the quote unquote folk magic. Okay. Or when I'm using things from, like, to me, folk magic too is less ritual. So like if I were to cast a circle and I were going to do a 3-day, vigil of candles and on the 4th day of the 6th moon, I kind of consider that my ritualistic magic, if that makes sense. To me, the folk magic is, like, and I know this is weird, but like, I have a cold and I'm going to drink elderberry syrup. That, even though it's weird, that to me is folk magic.
Okay. Could folk magic be just something that you do, like you're doing on your own, like I don't know, like a blend of like a cold elixir that you make for yourself that isn't
absolutely
okay?
Absolutely.
Okay. I didn't know if it had to be connected with like your ancestral lines or anything.
No, it's usually just something that you kind of like learn, just anything that you learned like growing up type of thing, or like old wives' tales or anything that your mom might have done, like just to make you feel better when you're sick or whatever. But another thing you said, I think you said like doing by yourself, which kind of sparked this, was folk magic and ceremonial magic. That's kind of where I draw that like definite line. Folk magic is earth-based. What is it? Is it like primarily like what like Wiccan books call it low magic?
Yeah.
Right? Okay, so like some people may know it as low magic, whereas ceremonial magic is more of high magic. So folk magic would be the earth-based. It can be with a group or with yourself, and it's used with the physical items around you. Whereas ceremonial magic is much more like in the mind space and like in the mind's eye, and it's usually used with groups of people. So chanting, meditations, things like that don't really require a lot of tools. It's more like energy direction. So I think, did I explain that okay?
Olivia's rocking it. Like, I would say that the easy way of saying it, like, folk magic, you can roll out of bed and do.
Yeah.
Ceremonial magic, you probably need a shower and some meditation before. And actually, that's another thing too. Like, folk magic, think of it like, to me, folk magic is like, I'm on my way to work and I want today to be a good day, so I'm going to stick this stone in my pocket and pick some rosemary, and that's folk magic, okay? A lot of other sorts of witchcraft or when I think ritual, once again, going back to the Greek, Roman, and Egyptian, they had a process. So a lot of that was cleansing. So you had to cleanse yourself, you had to cleanse your mind, and you had to cleanse your space, okay? To me, folk magic is, and I'm not going to say lazy magic because that's not the right way. Folk magic is the quick, tangible, what you had access to, because you also have to think of the day. Like, okay, that little Irish woman in the cottage, she did not have time to get up at 6 a.m., take a cleansing bath, and, like, do a ritual.
Not with her 6 kids. I don't think so.
No, she was going to go to the back, get some milk from the goat, pull that sheath of wheat. She was going to pull some parsley, and boom, that's her magic.
Wow, folk magic's way more chill.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and personally, what I've found is that if you put those two together, everything is like 10 times more powerful.
Mm-hmm.
So like if you're like, oh, I'm going to do a ritual bath, which is, like, it's folk magic. Yeah. You put everything together. I'm going to do a bath. But if you like cleanse yourself prior, you cleanse your space, you do all, like, you put all your tools together and you like concentrate all your tools, you're doing high magic and then you turn it into folk magic or vice versa. You're going to get a way more potent manifestation than you would, in my opinion, in my experience, than you would just using one or the other.
Yay. Yeah. Yeah. I like folk magic, guys. This is really like interesting.
Yeah.
I didn't know, I guess I didn't know anything about it until the two of you explained it. But it's like something it sounds like everybody's probably practiced at least once in their lives.
100%.
Lucky rabbit's foot, folk magic.
I remember that. Yeah, the rabbit's foot.
Yeah.
In the early 2000s, late 90s.
The dice in the car window. You guys remember that?
The fuzzy dice.
Yeah, the fuzzy dice.
Oh, the lucky dice. Yeah.
And that actually stems from keeping Mercury on your side, or Hermes, who is the god of travelers as well as gamblers.
Wow.
Oh my goodness. You're great. You just like pop out the history of.
Isn't it great? Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Wow. Do you combine, Olivia, your folk, like Irish and the Filipino art? Is that something that you do or will you do in the future? Like combining those folk magics, or can you do that?
Yeah, like I said, I think a lot of things intertwine pretty easily, but the Filipino side is still kind of like, I'm still unsure enough to the point that I don't feel like I'm totally practicing it quite yet, but I do think that in the future it's going to blend together, just because, like, I'm blended together. Why can't I, why can't I blend those two? And I feel like it's kind of like putting those two together, of like having that lighter feeling and that heavier feeling. I almost feel like I have that balance of like the fae with the spiritual realm, and also like the very, very earth-based folk magic practice with the Filipino side of it. Kulam.
Okay. Oh, that's what it's called.
Yeah, kulam. And then the practitioner is makukulam.
Okay.
Interesting.
Oh,
fun
wow.
word.
Yeah. Oh man, so you're still like a student of that.
Always.
I noticed that on your channel you do goddess work. How did you get interested in the various goddesses that you've that you've talked about?
Which videos were you seeing? So I was just trying to think back.
Oh, I saw you did one on, I think, Kali Ma, and then on your website you've mentioned them throughout like certain things.
Oh, yeah. Well, what's funny is I don't really feel like I actually work with deities much at all. But the funny thing is they just kind of pop up in my life like that. So the Kali Ma one was, I think I was doing an unboxing for a subscription box, and they had a ritual in there for her, which was kind of strange, interesting. Like, I didn't know anything too much about Kali Ma prior to that, which I wish they would have added more information about her, because there was no information at all about Kali Ma. And she's a very intense goddess to work with, just to throw at newbies. But
wait, did you just do a ritual about a goddess that you didn't know? That's kind of cool.
Well, they threw in that ritual, so they were just like, here you go. Which, again, like, I mean, you know, do whatever you want, but I still feel like you should have, like, they should have added more information. And then I did do a book review on goddesses recently, which was a very interesting book, because they were talking, or she was the artist. Wow. The author, I had to compile myself. The author was talking about all the different deities and goddesses that she worked with, and it just got me thinking about like how different goddesses had just kind of like popped up in my life a lot. So when I first met Dylan, it was Persephone that was just like all over the place. And though I don't really work with deities, I do kind of acknowledge like, oh, that energy is like around right now. So that's still a realm that I'm like still dabbling in, that I don't feel like I'm sufficient enough to really say that I can give you any information on. But it is a very interesting way of like seeing how that differs in different people's lives, how gods and goddesses pop up.
Yeah, I like that you said they just have come to you. I think that's pretty interesting, you know, in regards to just like, oh, it's kind of like they're like, hey, I want to work with you. And you're like,
yeah.
Okay,
I will say for Olivia, like watching her, because we've known each other, what, 4 years? And one thing that I will say is that I kind of feel like her experience with deities is the way that it should be, and it is organic. And she's never one to be like, oh, I need this. Like, I can't tell you how many witches and practicing witches I have found who attach themselves to a deity or goddess because they walked into a store and they're like, oh, I love this statue. Or in artists, like one thing that I got all the time is that someone, I've actually met people who are like, well, this one artist illustrated this goddess so well, she's my goddess. But then they won't acknowledge any other aspects of her because they're only attached to this one idea. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So like, I think with Olivia, the way that I see deities, they're archetypes. So they're personality traits. So I relate to, and maybe, you know, I will relate to deities that are well within my personality traits already, or have personality traits that maybe I don't have at all and that I need. Okay? And I kind of feel like the way that when I look at Olivia and when I watch Olivia, the way that she, even though she said she doesn't work with deities, she subconsciously does. No, she doesn't. No, because it's not worship. It's acknowledgement, if that makes sense. So she'll read up on deities and she'll be like, oh, this resonates with me, or this makes sense. Or like when it comes to ritual, you know, it'll be like, you know what, I need strength. So I am going to do this ritual and invoke this aspect of a goddess. A lot of people have this idea that they need to like, you know, worship this goddess, or they need to, but worship comes in many different ways.
That's interesting too, just the idea that you're worshiping versus working with that energy.
Yeah, that's a big thing that I'm starting to see, because again, like I don't feel like I work with deities all the time, but apparently I do, Dylan. But you know, like I think a lot of the questions that I get in my inbox is, you know, how do I find a deity, or like how do I know which one to worship? And it's kind of like, you don't have to worship it. And that's the freedom of being a practitioner, is that you don't have to rely on you know, on another god or deity or spirit or whatever for power, if that's not what you want. And on top of that, it's like, if you know that expression, wait, can I curse on here?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay. I don't want to be rude. But you know that expression of like, if you have to force a relationship, it's probably like a fart where it's shit. Where like, you know, like it's a terrible expression, but it's true. And I feel the same with spirits, of kind of like, if you have to force a relationship with a spirit, like I'm pretty sure the spirit's gonna be like, why are you calling me again? Like, you know, like it's gonna be really uncomfortable and doesn't feel as powerful and as strong as it should be. Whereas like even in those books and my reviews and the videos that you were seeing, was that author talks about how those deities showed up for her when she needed them. It wasn't like she went out and found this deity and was like, yeah, that's cool, I'm gonna take that one. They just kind of showed up, and then she did the research on them and realized how those deities connected in her life, and they were more like teachers that came in and out of her life rather than something that was like a replacement of the Christian God to worship.
That's a really nice way of like explaining that, just the idea of not just maybe deities, but just other like energies that might step forward to help you, maybe just like be open to receiving that help instead of forcing X, Y, and Z.
Well, and this is a little off topic, but I think that's the idea of invoking like the elements, is that you're not literally invoking earth or fire or whatever. You're invoking the energies of earth and fire and water and air, and so like I was saying when I was explaining my two different crafts, was that it's not like heavy. Like if I had to explain the Filipino side, it'd probably be like earth and fire. It'd be like, heavy and intense, whereas the Irish side would be more like flowy and lighter. So it'd be more on like the air water side. And so like, I'm not literally saying that it is like, a river or air. I'm just saying that that's the energies that implies. So it's kind of like when you invoke those energies, you're invoking, or when you invoke the elements, you're invoking the energies, not really like the literal elements.
And going off of what Olivia said, it's weird too, because I remember when I was in a coven, we had to share how we experienced like certain deities. And it was weird because everyone's answer was like, I did this ritual and I needed this, or, Apollo came to me when I was at the height of my divination and stuff like that. And what's so funny is that like, I remember writing, and I have it written down, and I've shared it before on like Facebook. I've never shared it on Instagram. I'm gonna do a post, but like, I'll tell you, like when I go through deities that have come to me, they came to me at early ages, but not in the way like full-bodied abs. Like I would say Apollo came to me when I wanted to audition for musical theater, and I was like 6 and I was shy as fuck, and I needed that boost of self-esteem. I think Hecate came to me when I first discovered my witchcraft book. And no, was she there in her triple form and she was wearing black robes? No, but that thought, does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely.
And like, I think like, when I think of communication, I think Hermes is always there when I communicate poorly because he just fucks shit up.
Yeah. I mean, I think sometimes like different energies, whether it be like gods, goddesses, I mean, people, angels, things like that. I think sometimes that stuff might come to you, but it might not be like your people are envisioning maybe like this ray of light and this like, I don't know, this being just like shows up, but maybe it might be just like a thought form in your mind or a physical sign. Like you having the Kali Ma stuff shipped to you, you could say that she came to you in that form and she wanted to
yeah, exactly.
There's a difference. I think sometimes people get confused, like maybe, I mean, some people experience seeing like full body apparitions, but I think a lot of people they'll just miss the like the signs of this energy, like, hey, I want to help you, and then they're just like, oh, whatever, and just don't like see it there.
And I mean, it's totally different for everybody. I'm not saying that like if you didn't have the experience that I had, then that's not what it is, but it's just like, I think that it's so much less complex than a lot of people make it. And I think that goes for a lot of practicing or the craft or spirituality at all. Like I feel like the idea that a lot of people think it is the more complex it is, the better and stronger it is, when in reality it's kind of the other way around.
So what advice would you guys give to people who like may be listening to this and are like, I want to start doing folk magic? Like what advice would you give them right out the gate?
My first thing is look at your ethnicity and your heritage and see. I mean, that doesn't have to be that's the only thing you can do. But like that, I think looking at that, you're going to find so much already, because in every culture there's folk magic. So even like, what did your parents tell you growing up? You know, like those little things of like, oh, the like we said, the tooth fairy, that already is folk magic. And if you want to look more into your culture and just kind of like those things to be a basis, and then start finding books on like any, like, you know, like Spanish folk magic, Google that, and I bet you anything, there's gonna be so much that shows up already on that. And then if you want to start practicing to actually start like manifesting things with that, I think just looking at what things that you might already do and then try to apply that in a different way.
Would the law of attraction fall into this like realm?
Absolutely. I think the law of attraction is magic. It is witchcraft. It's just applying the law of attraction with tools, if that makes sense.
Okay. Oh, there you go.
And one thing that I will say too, to go off of what Olivia just said about like things that we already do and finding ways, one thing that I have found across the board, regardless of who you are, we always have, all our cultures have a natural folk witchy way of protection, if that makes sense.
Yeah, so hanging garlic.
Yeah, hanging garlic, onions, salt, throwing this all over the shoulder, wearing a cross. Mm-hmm. I think what it is now is applying that next step. So the defensive, so now the offensive, or the conjure part, as in like attracting things to us. Yes. Because we naturally protect and we naturally send things away and repel. It's now finding things to bring in.
So it's just where you start thinking that way, it sounds like, and then you'll start noticing like
Yeah. And I would say too, like for people wanting to learn, one, look at the natural superstitions or old wives' tales that are in your culture or what you naturally know. Look into the history behind it. Maybe get a book on superstitions or a book on folk magic, and just like it just opens up a plethora of
you'll go
down the rabbit hole.
The minute you open it, and if you just take it and go with it, and you don't think too much about it, and you're just like, oh, that's interesting, you're gonna all of a sudden show up with like 40 books and like 20 tabs open on your computer and be like, how did I get here?
That's funny. That is really funny. It sounds like I like that way of getting into a magical practice as opposed to just like Googling. I don't know, like it just seems like it's become very popular, like the whole idea of like a witch and New Age thing. So people are just like Googling like, I don't know, money spell or love spell or whatever. And it seems like I like you guys take where you're going into like the root of what you're going to be practicing versus just like Googling something randomly. And
I have a whole like low-key rant video about how important basics and the foundations are, because you know you can cast a money spell every single day of your life, and it's not going to work the way you want it unless you know why and how you're like what you're doing, and like how you're like, why are you going to drive a car if you don't know how to put it in park?
Mm-hmm. It's true. Another thing too is that like the danger. This just came to me, and Olivia and this podcast has now inspired me how to respond to this person on my Instagram. Okay. When you Google a spell, okay. My issue with Google is that a lot of people don't put the resources. So any Tom, Dick, and Harry can go on Google and be like, this is my spell, okay? Look at the essence or the development of the spell, because a lot of spells can be cultural or have a cultural foundation. And if you are not familiar, like that's, I think, where the danger is. If you are not familiar of that culture, if you are not familiar of the origins of why or who or when, because also a lot of spells can conjure deities, and I can't tell you how many Google spells will be like love spell, and then the invocation will be like one of them is to Yamaya, who is a Haitian Loa,
and everybody's like,
okay, Yamaya. If you don't know who she is, if you don't know who she is, a lot of people will just think it's a magical word. They won't know that she's a spirit or an entity. So I think that's where a lot of the Google kind of scares me. And I do know several, like there's a book, it's literally just called Love Spells. Half the invocations are to deities. And there's no asterisk, which they should do. They should put an asterisk that says who the deity is or who the spirit is that you're calling.
And maybe give some sources on how more to
learn about them.
Yeah. It just seems more respectful to know what you're doing. Like I don't like to, like you were saying, like some of these things are coming from different cultures and then there might be deities involved, and it just seems like there's not as much respect if you're just like, oh, how do I do this? And the research, which I think is pretty important, especially, you know, if you're trying to have like positive energy around like what you're working with. Right out the gate, you're starting in like a funky space.
Totally.
Or it's like the fairies, like you have to keep it going. You can't just call one time and then say, okay, thanks. They're still there.
Yeah. You just have like a room
stay woke, don't provoke.
I love that.
God. T-shirts, let's do it.
T-shirts.
I need those T-shirts, you guys.
Oh my gosh. You know, another thing too is that a lot of people will be like, well, why didn't my spellcraft work? And this is why, you know, I offer spell work, and I charge for it, and that's a service I provide. But before you get anything from me, I have a list of letting you all know, this is what's going to happen. This is what you need. This is what's required. I mean, I've had people that were like, oh, well, my spell work didn't work. And I'm like, what happened? They're like, well, you know, it said that it was a 4-day ritual. You know, I only did it. I did it once every 2 days. I did it for an hour. My boyfriend actually ended up calling me, so I thought everything was fine. So I didn't do the rest of the spell work. But now he's decided that he's going to move to like Manchester and like start a new career. And it's like, well,
this is really specific.
Whoops. But it's like, you know, did you follow through?
Like if you don't follow the rules, follow the direction, it can have the opposite effect sometimes.
Or like a negative
turn. That's funny.
Yeah.
Or when people like, you know, when you do a love candle for someone, you know, if you want that person, that's awesome. You know, put your energy there, open yourself to attracting that person, things like that. Okay. But I always think it's funny when people were like, well, you know, I did this love spell for someone, but then I was on Tinder and I matched with Joe, you know, okay, well, your energy was distracted. No wonder so-and-so is not going to work for you.
Yeah, you're like putting the wrong signs out there for the universe.
Yeah.
Oh, man. I think, too, sometimes it's important to understand the, like, karmic, I guess, aspect to doing like spells. You know, if you're doing something negative, it can come back on you, like if it's harmful for someone else, or I believe that anyways.
The law of free will gets involved.
Yeah, the law of free will.
Yeah.
I definitely agree in the law of free will, and I don't like, you know, I don't like manipulating people or trying to coerce people.
What's Jessica's, right? No.
Oh, Allie. Yeah. Allie, don't pervert the purpose.
Oh, that's good.
Our friend Allie says that, and I love it.
That, yeah.
Wow. Oh, that's
manipulate the situation, not the person.
Manipulate the situation, not the person.
Is it hard to manipulate people? I know it sounds like silly, but are people like, is that?
Okay, so actually, I'm sorry. Was that the question?
Yeah, I'm curious. Like, even if, like, say somebody did want to do something to influence another person, would that be harder to achieve because of, I don't know, the other individual's free will and like their energy not aligning with that? Does that make sense?
So yes and no. It depends on the person that you're trying to manipulate, because say, I mean, like I don't remember. I think I said this somewhere, but I don't know. But so say I'm going to use you as an example, Dylan. So say Dylan just got out of a really bad relationship. He's malleable right now. You know, he's vulnerable. He's very he's easily influenced. So that could be for the better or for the worst. So if I'm like, yo, I'm going to get with Dylan, then he's easily influenced right now. And I'm going to like throw a love spell on him. And like, he's not in the right space of mind. So if he is able to be manipulated just by anybody else, like his friend group, then of course I can throw energy at him to easily manipulate him. However, if there's just like no way, because Dylan, you're not gonna fall in love with me romantically.
I don't know. You're looking mighty fine.
Oh, thank you. It worked.
What was that tea you gave me?
But so like if Dylan has no interest in me whatsoever and never has, and I'm trying to like get him to fall in love with me, he's just gonna be like, why the hell am I thinking about Olivia all the time? Why do I keep being reminded of her? Why is she showing up on my Instagram all the time? But that's not going to make him fall in love with me if that intention on his side wasn't already there. So it just really depends on the person. Like I said, if they're already easily imprinted, if they're easily influenced by other friends around them, then of course you're going to be able to have an easier way. But at the end of the day, if they don't want to do it, or if they are not going to react on it in the first place, they're not going to do it with your influence.
Oh, okay. Ooh, wow.
And yeah, you have to look at the logistics, and the way that she said it too, it's not saying that it's not going to work, but it would be something along the lines of like, okay, I'm constantly being reminded of her, or what ends up happening is that, which could backfire for like Olivia in this scenario, say that she did want that romantic relationship. What could end up happen is that, while I'm vulnerable, I think of her, I become dependent on her on a friendship level, right, which can only cause her more frustration and more pain if what she's wanting is something more.
So he's going to so basically what you're doing when you're quote unquote influencing somebody is that you're handing them a very strong suggestion. Mm. What they do with that suggestion is up to them. You cannot control somebody like a zombie. I know that a lot of people believe that you can, but I have yet to see it. All of my teachers have yet to tell me that that is a thing. Like across the board, all of my teachers. Mm-hmm. And so from what I standpoint and from where I stand and what I believe right now and what I have experienced, you can hand somebody a very strong suggestion spiritually and energetically, but what they do with it is totally up to that person. Hmm.
And you'll know it's possible when, you see that I'm married to Hugh Jackman. Then we'll be having the second podcast. There Olivia will be like, I saw it.
I was wrong.
Oh my goodness. It would suck to be like a celebrity if that was like a thing.
Oh yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Could you imagine though? Yeah. There's no way.
It'd be no way. Every celebrity would be with a witch. Yeah. Wait, maybe that's what it is.
Maybe that is what it is. Oh, maybe they are.
We just
Beyonce.
Beyonce.
You cannot tell me that Beyonce and Rihanna are not witches.
They are.
Yeah. I've heard a lot of crazy
about all the celebrities. Like
yeah.
Me too. Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you? There's one with the Kardashians.
Oh yeah, mm-hmm. Yeah. There's a whole conspiracy. Yeah. I feel like sometimes when I go on these tangents, that meme of that guy with like all of the strings attached of the the photos on his wall, and he's like, "Look at this."
Yeah. It all adds up.
Well, someone tried to tell me that Britney Spears' Toxic was a spell.
Really?
And I was like, what? Yeah, that it was a ritual, that it was a ritualistic spell. And I was like...
You're like, so my next coven meeting...
My next coven meeting, we're going to do Toxic.
He's the high priest of the coven. He's just going to show up and be like, here's your... Here's
no.
He turns on the Bluetooth speaker. He's like, okay, everybody get in get your head in the game.
Oh my!
Take a sip of my devil's cup.
Oh my god!
All right, it does.
I'm looking that up.
Right? Yeah.
I'm like, it's juicy.
Yeah, exactly.
Do you guys have any books you would recommend for anyone interested in starting their own practice, and in particular folk magic?
The age-old question.
I would say anything by Denise Alvarado. She has a Voodoo spell book. Yeah. She has a wonderful book on Marie Laveau. Marie Laveau's book of magic and practices. Mm-hmm.
There's a charm bag book that I picked up. I'm sorry, I do not remember the author, but it's literally called The Art of Crafting Charm Bags, I believe. And that one's a really great one just because I think charm bags are totally folk magic and they're super easy to make. And there's candle magic, like literally there's so many books on those that I feel like is a great resource Sigils by Laura Zakroff. That's a really good one too for folk magic because again, sigils are so diverse. Very good for for beginner and people who are practicing in secret are sigil book.
There's a book called 365 Days of Hoodoo by Stephanie Rose Bird, which is really good. She also does Roots, Bones, Roots, and I forget the other one. I think it's Conjure, Roots, and Bones. But she has 2 really good books.
Okay. Oh, we're gonna look all these up.
Yeah, absolutely.
She's like, our book list just gets longer and longer the more people we.
Oh, that's the best. I literally have like 8 books on a pile in my room that I'm just like just trying to truck through right now.
There's also a good folk magic book by DJ Conway too, which is really good.
But so, is there anything that you want to let our listeners know before we wrap it up?
I mean, like a self promo, Dylan has a podcast called The Witch and the Medium with a wonderful medium named Adela Levine. She is amazing, and he also runs a YouTube channel and also has an Instagram. I love you. This is why I'm doing this. But like I said, I also have a YouTube channel. Mine is more experimental and much more kind of like I'm just figuring this out too.
Hers is badass.
So I just kind of take you along that journey, and then my Instagram isn't super witchy. It's more just like photos and pole dancing, but. You know, if that interests you.
But Olivia's very good at offering the resources. I'm very good at saying, "Look what I'm doing," and then I give you, and then my post is essentially a history lesson.
True.
Yeah, I mean, you guys are, like I said, a wealth of knowledge. And Olivia, your website does have a lot of like resources. I noticed.
Oh, great! I'm glad. Thank you.
Yeah, I think you have like the downloadable things too for people if they wanted. So we can link that below. We'll link both your websites.
Yeah,
and your
Perfect.
YouTube channel.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you guys for being on the show.
Absolutely, it was a pleasure. Thank you so much for having us.
Yes, pleasure. Thank you.
As usual, at the end of every episode, we like to send our listeners distant Reiki. We recommend not driving or operating machinery because it might make you a little sleepy. We suggest sitting in a meditative state or in a comfortable spot. Though it's not required, you'll still receive the energy. When the music starts, the Reiki session has begun, and at the end of the song, it is over. If you would like to learn more about Reiki, you can go to our website at arlene.com/Reiki. Thanks for listening. Bye.